For 2,500 years, one name has pretty much been the gold standard for power, for ambition, for pure world-altering conquest: Alexander the Great. We're talking about a king who took the throne at just 20 years old and, in a little over a decade, completely redrew the map of the known world. He created an empire that would literally change the course of history forever. It's almost like his own father, King Philip II, saw it coming. He said this to a teenage Alexander right after he did something nobody thought was possible. He tamed this wild, untamable horse, Bucephalus. And he didn't do it with brute force. He did it with smarts, with understanding, a lesson he'd later apply to entire empires. And that very horse would end up carrying him all the way to the edge of the known world. So that's the big question, right? What was it that forged this incredible, almost superhuman ambition? And what was the real cost of creating a kingdom that was actually worthy of Alexander the Great? To really get a handle on the man, you have to start with his upbringing, which was, well, it was extraordinary. He was really shaped by two incredibly powerful and kind of contradictory forces. I mean, just look at this timeline. His childhood wasn't just about going to school, it was a nonstop apprenticeship in how to wield power. At 10, he shows that legendary courage with Bucephalus. By 16, his dad leaves him in charge, and he's not just keeping the lights on, he's crushing a rebellion and founding a city and naming it after himself. Then, by 18, he's a top commander in the battle that cements his father's control over all of Greece. It's just wild. And this right here, this perfectly illustrates the two halves of his education. On one side, you've got the prized student of Aristotle himself, learning philosophy, logic, and developing this deep appreciation for Greek culture. But on the other side, he is a warrior, through and through, ruthlessly drilled in every aspect of military tactics. This crazy combination created something totally new, a brilliant strategic mind that could actually appreciate the culture of the very people he was about to go and conquer. But he didn't just get handed the keys to the kingdom. No, his path to power wasn't some peaceful inheritance. It was seized, violently, in the chaotic mess right after his father was assassinated, and everything was about to change. So picture this. He's just 20, and he knows his grip on the throne is shaky at best. So what does he do? He acts with terrifying speed and brutality. He gets rid of his father's new wife and her baby son, a potential rival. He has political opponents assassinated overseas. And then, when the proud city of Thebes rebels, thinking some kid will be an easy target, he burns the entire city to the ground and sells its people into slavery. The message couldn't have been clearer. My rule is absolute. Do not test me. Okay, so with Greece now basically unified by fear, Alexander turned his eyes to the east. He aimed for his father's ultimate dream, the grand prize, the Persian Empire, the biggest, richest superpower the world had ever seen. In 334 BC, he crosses into Asia. And get this, he sets out to challenge this global superpower with an army of just 40,000 soldiers. Think about that. It's an ambition that is so far out there, it's bordering on pure madness. It was a gamble for quite literally the entire world. And this brings us to that famous story of the Gordian knot. So there's this ancient prophecy, right? It says that whoever can untangle this ridiculously complicated knot is destined to rule all of Asia. So Alexander comes along, takes a look at it, and instead of messing with the loops, he just pulls out his sword and slices it right in half. It's the perfect story because it totally captures his mindset. Why bother playing by the old rules when you can just make your own? And his genius wasn't just about these bold, symbolic moments. It was about relentless, brutal problem solving. Take the city of Tyre. It was this island fortress that everyone thought was completely impenetrable. So what does Alexander do? For 7 agonizing months, he makes his army build a half-mile-long land bridge, a causeway through the ocean, all while under constant enemy fire, just so he could roll his siege towers up to their walls. The sheer force of will there is just staggering. But that brilliance had a truly horrific edge. After the city finally fell, an absolutely enraged Alexander had 8,000 of Tyre's citizens massacred. His incredible determination came with a terrifying price for anyone who dared to stand in his way for too long. And this is where his story gets so complicated, because while he was a complete destroyer in cities like Tyre and Thebes that fought back, he marches into Egypt and they welcome him as a liberator. They literally hailed him as the son of a god and crowned him pharaoh because they saw him as their savior from the Persians. So which one was he? A brutal conqueror or a liberator? And the answer, really, is that it depended entirely on whether you stood with him or stood in his way. Now, this all came to a head at the Battle of Gaugamela. You have to look at these numbers because they are just insane. Alexander is facing the entire might of the Persian Emperor Darius III. And some of the ancient estimates put the Persian army at close to 1 million men. It should have been a complete wipeout for Alexander. But using just unbelievable tactics, he shattered the Persian lines, forced Darius to run for his life, and basically won the entire Persian Empire in a single day. So you'd think after defeating Persia, the largest empire on earth, he'd maybe take a break, right? Nope. He just kept pushing his army east all the way to the edges of the known world in India. But his limitless ambition was about to slam head-on into the very real, very human limits of his own men. After a solid decade of constant marching, constant fighting, after facing things like war elephants and fighting fierce kingdoms in India, his army finally just had enough. I mean, they were thousands of miles from home, they were exhausted, and they mutinied. For the very first time, Alexander's will was broken, not by an enemy army, but by his own loyal soldiers. He had no choice. He was forced to turn back. And that decision kicks off this final, frantic few years. It's just a whirlwind of war, diplomacy, and this really radical cultural experiment. He fights his toughest battle ever in India. He marries a foreign princess to try and secure his eastern borders. And then he tries his most audacious project yet, trying to fuse Greek and Persian cultures by forcing 80 of his top generals to marry Persian noblewomen, all in one giant ceremony. But you can really start to see the cracks forming. His veteran Macedonian soldiers, the guys who'd been with him from the start, felt totally betrayed when he started adopting Persian clothes and customs. He grew paranoid, executing old friends and trusted generals. And even as his massive empire was straining under its own weight, what was he doing? He was already planning his next impossible campaign, the invasion of Arabia. His ambition just never, ever stopped. And that ambition is what brought him back to Babylon, the heart of his new empire. He arrived there as a triumphant conqueror, but he would never leave it alive. After a long night of feasting and drinking, Alexander came down with a sudden raging fever. And for 12 agonizing days, the most powerful man in the world just got weaker and weaker. And then he died. He was only 32 years old. The cause is still one of history's great mysteries. Was it poison, malaria, typhoid fever? The truth is, we'll probably never know for sure. So when you boil it all down, you're left with this huge contradiction. Was he a brilliant, visionary unifier? Absolutely. His conquests spread Greek ideas and culture all the way from Egypt to India, creating this whole new Hellenistic world that blended East and West. But was he also a brutal tyrant whose ambition left a trail of destruction, only to have his entire empire collapse into 50 years of civil war the second he died? Yes, he was both. In the end, he did exactly what his father challenged him to do. He found a kingdom worthy of himself. It was a kingdom built on pure genius and an ocean of bloodshed. One that changed the world forever, but couldn't even survive its own creator. And it leaves us with that great, lingering question. What might have happened, for better or for worse, if the man who conquered the world had actually lived to rule it?